We may have lost Deuce and Mo as they're Googling the dead woman in Peru who came back to life.
Bro, she was never dead, though. She was
apparently.
In a coma, and they pronounced her dead. At the funeral, she's in the coffin, bangs on the coffin. But then they, luckily somebody heard her, and they sweep her out of the procession and take her to the hospital.
I'll be honest, no chance I'm opening that coffin.
No. Also, how traumatic if she's a mother, like whether they're adult children or young children, I don't give a damn. Like, oh my God, I'm traumatized and I don't even know this woman.
I hear that banging. I'm running. I'm
owning the whole healthcare system in Peru after that. Like, how do you guys? Yeah, she's dead. She's dead, guys. What?
What? God, I would like to do that with a lot of people, huh?
Oh my! Well, that's a dark start to our conversations with Deuce and Mo Televisions. Deuce and Mo, NBC Sports California, and of course, host of the Deuce and Mo podcast. Deuce Mason, Morgan Reagan. We spent the commercial break getting acquainted, talking about how great it feels to cover the same three names for the last 5 days.
2.5.
It's 2 now.
It's 2.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Let's get to what people are really asking. Yeah. Was Steve Clifford ever really a serious candidate?
I want to say yes if he was a finalist, but I personally, and this is just my opinion, I think pushing him into that finalist role kind of pushes the narrative of like, hey, you want to be a lead assistant over here on someone's coaching staff? Again, that's just my opinion. I don't know anything about that.
Well, and I'm with you on that a little bit. I mean, I think they were interested in talking to him, one, because he has, with Orlando and Charlotte, gotten the most out of those rosters, turned them into competitive defensive teams. And, he's not like, oh my God, look at those deep playoff runs. He's done a good job. I think he's a really good coach. But yeah, I mean, if it's
really good,
he's a good coach. I'm not saying head coach. I think he's a good coach. I think he's just, in terms, he knows the game. He's prepared. He's organized. Been in the game a long time. So he's got a little bit of history with Mike Brown. And if it ends up being Mark Jackson is going to need an experienced coaching staff. So I don't know. Is that a route there? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think he was a serious guy. Like, I think they gave him a serious look. I don't think they ever really thought he would get to the point where he's down to the final 2. But there are aspects of what they brought to the table that they like. He fit the criteria. It seemed like they had of having an experienced guy as opposed to a new head coach. So maybe they wanted to talk to him face to face. But I agree with what you guys talked about, is where kind of throw him this bone, and if they come back around after the head coach is hired and it's like, hey, Steve, we really like how you interviewed. Would you mind, being on the bench? Are you interested in that? At least they have a little bit of goodwill with him at that point to say, to even ask him that.
Right.
That's got to be. I mean, Steve Clifford and Mike Brown don't necessarily need to be on the same staff, right? Like, this
why not? Right?
They never score.
I mean, no, I guess my point is, it's like, I personally look at it as like, the more basketball minds around on a coaching staff, the better. The more understanding of what good basketball can mean and standards is better. And Mike Brown has talked about so many times. I mean, Deuce and I have watched way too many interviews and read too many articles with Mike Brown and have fallen far too in love with him. Me. But even with the way that he talks about Steve Kerr, and like, there's no ego. There's never an ego. And so like, it's just such a collaborative effort. And I feel like he's taken that on and has learned that over his years, even with just the Warriors. And I don't know. And that's why when I see that, if that was the case with Steve Clifford, I think that would be the standard.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, look at what the Warriors have done with their staff. They've changed it over a couple of times. Kerr, you've got a former head coach, and Mike Brown, former head coach, and Kenny Atkinson. Like, it's a well-rounded staff.
Yeah, I agree. Damian talked about it earlier in the week, and I think we both came to the same conclusion. One of the concerns that we both had about going with Mark Jackson as opposed to Mike Brown is filling out that staff.
Yeah.
And I don't know what Mark's reputation is around the league to the coaches to be able to fill out a staff. I'm very confident Mike Brown has a lot of great relationships and a lot of people that he would be able to pull in at the drop of a dime pretty much. So
I'm with you. That's one. I mean, look, the Mark Jackson thing, I know you guys have talked about it a ton. There's so many layers here, right? And that was one of my big questions. One, him being away from the game for so long. I know he's a broadcaster, but has he been around other teams? Like Mike Brown, when he was not with the Warriors, after the Cavs thing ended, he's spending time with Pop in San Antonio. He's like 50 games with them, just being around at practices, games, just in the mix, right? Trying to learn a little bit, just getting his feet wet again. Mm-hmm. Has Mark been talking to coaches? Has he visited? Is he worked on evolving the game? The game has changed since he coached in 2014. It's not the same game. So what has he done? And then to your point, Kenny, has he built relationships that can he fill out a legitimate coaching staff? I don't know.
Are you dead set against Mark Jackson?
Against him?
Against him, yeah. Against the idea of him being
No, I'm not. And I think for me personally, it's just that I'm open to second chances. I'm open to people changing. I'm open to people evolving. We all act like we know everything when we read things from 8 years ago, which could absolutely be the same. And he could still be this egotistical guy with some different views that we don't agree on and stuff. Or we can humanize the situation a little bit and be we're just not seeing interviews with Mark Jackson 24/7 and seeing if he has changed, if he has evolved.
If there wasn't a former player coming out and saying good things about him, I don't think I'd have much interest. But I think the pro Jackson people, and then you got the anti Jackson people, the extremes are crazy. It's society in 2022. That's what it is. And it's there's some middle ground here. To suggest that we should just ignore what Steph has said, Draymond, and this isn't hey, they're in a scrum answering questions from the media. They're talking to each other on their podcast. It's Andre Iguodala talking about him, right? Klay Thompson. There's a lot of guys who like him. And I do think that stuff matters. And then I started thinking about second chances for sure. I'm not even saying that Mark Jackson should be the guy. If I were running things, I think Mike Brown should be the head coach of the Sacramento Kings. We can get into that in a second. But Mark doesn't ever deserve a second chance because he didn't get along with the front office or ownership. But Tom Thibodeau gets hired and hired and hired. He's had issues with front offices too. And in some regards, his players get sick of him. So now we're just quickly dismissing a guy who I think a lot of people don't like because he has a big ego, the comments that he's allegedly made. I understand all of that. But to just quickly dismiss and act like this guy should never be around again, I think that's unfair. Now, I think Mark could have helped his case a little more by coming out and talking more about those issues. I think he could have helped his case drastically had he joined a staff as an assistant coach.
Yes.
The guy looks at himself as a head coach. I don't agree with that path. I think he should have been getting some touches as an assistant and trying to, rehabilitate his image with front offices, I guess. But who's to say he doesn't deserve a second chance? It may not be Sacramento. It may be somewhere else. But he did get results in his 3 seasons with the Warriors.
Yeah. When I think of Mark Jackson and I ask the question about, like you guys just said, he doesn't deserve another chance at all. And people talk about nobody liking him and stuff like that. I always think about George Karl. Every time anybody comes across George Karl, they talk about how he's the biggest jerk and just kind of pompous every single stop. He wears his welcome out everywhere he goes. And what do you get? 4 jobs? 4 jobs? I know it's
a lot.
And he has a long list of assistants that hate his guts.
Yeah. Yeah. So, like you said, Deuce, I don't know if this is the right situation for Mark Jackson. And I'm actually if he didn't get hired, because I've been saying this for a long time about, he doesn't deserve another opportunity and all this other stuff. If he doesn't get hired with this job, I like the fact that he was seriously considered and got an interview, because I didn't think that was happening a lot. And I thought that was unfair. You know what I mean? Like, it was just, no, don't ever bring. I think he had the interview with the Knicks a few years ago. But other than that, it was just like, don't even touch him for an interview. And that's not fair. Have a conversation with the man. You know what I'm saying? See what's going on. See for yourself some of the things that you've heard and if they are accurate or not. So I'm glad that he got a serious look at this particular head coaching job. But I understand anybody that doesn't think that this is the right situation for Mark Jackson to be in.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I mean, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say we haven't even touched on what perhaps is the most awkward thing involving Mark Jackson yet, and that's, I'll tell you in a second, because you're listening to D'Lo and Casey along with Deuce and Mo here on ESPN 1320 KIFM, West Sacramento, KRXQ, HD2 Sacramento and Odyssey Station, and driven by Lasher's Elk Grove Dodge. Again, television's Deuce and Mo with us here. It's the fact that because of the stories that have come out in recent days, if Mark Jackson's hired, no one's going to believe Monty McNair did it.
Mm-hmm.
And that just opens up a whole other problem for the Sacramento Kings and the perception of this organization.
It totally does, Damian. And I think people have every right to feel that way and to judge the situation in that sense. And then Deuce and I have talked about this so many times. Like, if you're Monty McNair or if you're any GM and this situation was happening to you, and especially in Sacramento, why would you even want that on your resume at that point? You know, I mean, I'm saying this and I'm not there making all that money, and I don't understand obviously how it all works. At the same time, I just think like there's a certain point where you have to look at your integrity and what you believe in as a GM, and do you want that on your record over time? So hopefully that is not going to be the case either way, that with Mark Jackson being the head coach for the Sacramento Kings, because you're exactly right. If it is, that's going to be the angle everyone goes at. And
that's going to be up to them as an organization to sell it. To convince a fan base that, like, hey, no, Monty needs to come out and do more than just like, no, he's my guy. Like, kind of put that, I would just come out with it and like, hey, this narrative that's out there that, like, I mean, as long as it really is his choice, I would hope it is, right?
Yeah.
Like,
because if it's not, he needs to quit.
Yeah, I mean, you said that yesterday. I heard you say that yesterday, and we said that the other day too. It's like, I wouldn't want my name on it if I didn't make the choice.
No,
like, I'm trying to be a front office guy for years to come. I'm trying to get maybe another gig or an extension. I want to go down swinging with the guy that I believe in.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right. Like,
no, I mean, you think 16 years, dude, this is the other thing Deuce and I were touching on the other day. 16 years. We all know that the Kings losing everything, whatever. This is probably one of the most like controversial, historic Kings head coaching searches in history. And we kind of look back and we're like, God, but we do say that every year because I mean, every couple of years whenever there's a coaching change. But I feel like more than ever, because that 16-year mark is now the record, and there's so many other things that are backing this up, where it's like this younger crowd of NBA fans in Sacramento, you're literally not going to have a fan base here, a young fan base developing here in Sacramento if you don't get this right soon. And now is the time to get this right. And that's why this is just such a compelling Kings head coaching search.
How accurate do you think those rumors and reports are about Vivek wanting Jackson and the other two wanting Mike Brown? And I ask because I don't particularly believe it. Maybe not at the way it's presented. Like if you ask Vivek, he's probably like, well, I mean, I like Mark Jackson. I knew him in Golden State. Think he's a good coach, all this other stuff. But in the same sense, you can be like, but it's not my call. I'm just telling you. But it's presented as there's the battle, the mega powers colliding right now, and who's going to win out. I don't believe it's like that, right? Well, how serious do you think it is?
Kenny, I think it would have been like that, you guys. Again, speculation / just going off of reports that have been coming out. I think it would have been like that if Joe Dumars was still with the Sacramento Kings, because that last piece that came out, that Sam Amick did an amazing job, once again, getting the inside scoop on the influence that Joe Dumars actually had on Vivek, and him also wanting Mark Jackson and also wanting control of Monty McNair. It's like, yes, there was an obvious divide, but now that he is departing, I feel like the things have shifted.
I mean, the problem here is just a track record. I mean, it's just
right.
It's happened for a long time. So anything when you hear Vivek and coach, you're like, whoa, is he having to say, guys, any owner in professional sports, I guarantee you, Steve Ballmer, Mark Cuban, Lacob, like any owner in the NBA is going to try to throw some names at his game, right? He's gonna, hey, talk to this guy. What about this guy? I like this guy, of course. And they're going to be involved in some of the interviews too, because Steve Ballmer met with Mike Brown the last time Mike Brown interviewed for a job with the Clippers. He did a Zoom interview, then he flew to LA, spent a day with Steve Ballmer. And that job ended up going to Ty Lue. My point being is, of course, they're going to be involved somewhat, but the difference is, at the end of the day, if Vivek is challenging, asking tough questions, there is nothing wrong with that. It just has to be the general manager's decision, in my opinion, at the end of it. Like, hey, you can go ahead and ask the tough questions. You're the guy who spent a lot of money on this team. You're signing the checks, but you also have to entrust your basketball ops people.
And I'll say this. If I'm wrong, somebody could educate me, whatever the case may be. But what kind of doesn't get reported the same way is, for the most part, Vivek has let the basketball people do whatever they want. He just picked the wrong basketball people. You know what I'm saying? Like Mike Malone. That wasn't Vivek saying, I need him out of here. He got talked to by his basketball people. Say, we got to get this guy out of here. Vlade, Luke Walton, all this other stuff. Even with the situation when Luke got fired. Now, Luke being here to start the season, we never know whose choice that really was. But I think it's always, Vivek's always meddling. I can make the argument. Like I said, you guys tell me if I'm wrong. There's more times than not, he lets the basketball people do what they do. They just aren't good. They're not good.
Well, I think the Nick Stauskas thing too plays in everyone's mind. I think that I think his most egregious stuff is it's really bad. Just 1 second, because Jesse is pestering me to give away these festival tickets. You've got the opportunity to pick your festival, the Golden Sky Festival or the world famous Aftershock Festival. We've got tickets for you right now. You can pick whichever one you want to go to. We got you. Call in number 3-916-349-1320. We'll get you all set up again. You can pick between the Golden Sky Festival on October 15th and 16th or the world famous Aftershock Festival, October 6th to 9th. Again, call in number 3 now, 916-349-1320. His biggest mistakes are really big and they're really public. Like Nick Stauskas thing. There's no rumor around it. It's on video. It's arguably your most humiliating moment as a franchise owner. Like, it's fair. The 4-on-5 basketball thing. It's on video.
Damian.
Well, real quick, the 4-on-5 basketball thing.
He said it. Come on now.
Was he really saying, let's play 4-on-5? Like, he wasn't. I'm going to tell George Karl, we need to play 4-on-5. He just talked about it. Like,
he's the same dude who was talking about basketball 2.0.
Yeah, he's a little bit. I think that's.
Vivek literally tried to reinvent the game James Naismith created.
You guys.
Do a software update.
This is the thing, too, you guys. If there's video of anything in this world, you know how it amplifies anything, right? And people gravitate to it and go, oh, okay, well, there is proof or there's this. And then that is what people will go along with forever. And the only way to erase people's memories of this video and of other decisions is to start getting wins. And that doesn't matter if it was with Mark Jackson. It doesn't matter if it was with Mike Brown. It's just about getting these wins, and so many things get erased. I want to say get erased, but it's not going to be like one winning season and Kings fans are like, wow, my memory, I don't even remember those bad times. No. It's going to take a lot of winning.
It could work like that. Like, you get one little playoff night at Doco, boy, that could maybe not all 16, but it might erase 12 of them.
We were talking about the other day too. If for some reason the Kings like started winning 50 games every season, it's like each season, then the expectations are going to be higher and higher and more. And like I'm excited to get to that point, but I'm just laughing that is what it's going to be one day.
Oh, it's still going to be miserable though. That's the thing.
Yes.
I want to irrationally blame the star player. I mean, is this guy really that guy? We can't get to the conference finals with this guy.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. Any coach that comes in here is going to be criticized. Alman was criticized. Steve Kerr last year was being criticized like crazy. Oh, is this really the coach that going forward?
Mike Budenholzer.
Everybody, Budenholzer was getting criticized until he won the thing, and they was like, "Hey, man, the Budenholzer coaching tree, though."
Budenholzer was getting fired until he won the thing.
Yes.
So I mean, it comes with the territory. Like every coach we're going to be talking about lineups and minute distribution, and what about this? Like that. That's just what happens, even if there's success.
It's the nature of the beast.
Yeah. The one thing about all of the Vivek Monty stuff that just it's when you find like you could have like a big bowl here, but if you find like a little kernel that's off, it kind of throws the whole thing into doubt. And when Mark Stein wrote in his newsletter that Vivek Ranadive had been really impressed with Mark Jackson through this interview process, meanwhile, and no discredit to Mark Stein, every other reporter was like, yeah, Vivek hasn't been a part of the interview process yet.
Yeah.
Now there are a variety of ways in which both could be true, but immediately it was like, wait, this isn't adding up. Like, this doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and I mean, that's where this stuff that gets tweeted out. You just don't know who's a source. Like, is that Clutch putting that out to Stein? Like, hey man, Vivek really likes Mark Jackson. He's impressed him. And maybe Vivek did see the interviews because they were on Zoom and they recorded them, and Vivek watched them later. I don't know. Maybe Vivek was on the call and had his screen off and was just listening. I mean, maybe he was in the room. I don't know. I don't even really, to be honest, I don't have a problem with an owner being involved in the interview process.
Yeah.
Absolutely not.
I mean, I just don't I think that's like overblown. I think people, again, it goes back to what we have said about the past, right? Nick Stauskas and all this the stuff that has happened in his tenure as an owner, where you go, oh no, is he picking it? The owner could be involved, and you know what? I'm fine with the owner asking some questions. It's all about who's deciding it.
That's right.
Like that's all there is to it.
If you want to be an owner, be an owner. If you want to be Jerry Jones, be Jerry Jones.
Right.
But be one or the other. Exactly. Like I echo Morgan's sentiment exactly. But you've got to do one or the other.
Well, I agree. One of the things that I've talked about throughout, trying to break down these candidates, and Damian brought up a good point about a counterpoint, is I kept talking about, I think the most important aspect of this new coach should be somebody that is in lockstep with getting the most out of De'Aaron Fox. Mm-hmm. And I think that's almost priority number one. And then Damian said, well, maybe you're not going to unlock any more than you already got out of De'Aaron Fox. And I think that's a problem in a whole nother way. Like if we have the same season that we had last year, the whole ups and downs or the slow start or whatever, I don't really care who the coach is. It's not going to work. It's not going to work.
Yeah, that's it. That's interesting, Kenny, because you're right. And I think sometimes too, Damian, even with you saying like, look, you're not going to unlock anything else out of him. I think personally, and I've said this for so long, with De'Aaron Fox in his game, I feel like he's never been taught basketball the right way, how to play basketball the right way. For example, when you are in AAU basketball, when you're in college basketball, and you are the fastest person on the floor, you're going to have a different technique in how you develop and play the game through those seasons than you are when you get into a professional level, when that technique doesn't just necessarily work on bigger, faster, better players, right? And I feel like De'Aaron has done a good job of adjusting in different places and has shown growth in some of his game. But I believe if he's taught basketball how to play it the right way, his IQ, his knowledge, the way that he will move defensively and everything can all come into play and actually flourish, and really someone can unlock that with De'Aaron. I just don't know who it is. It needs to be like a basketball mind.
I mean, De'Aaron said after the season, he talked about structure,
right?
Going in the games, practices. There is always an element of teaching that needs to be done that I'm not sure was being done by the previous coach, Walton or Gentry. I think there was just a lot of you're open, go shoot it type
run through the motions.
I mean, you saw it at times with Sabonis where like Sabonis has the rock and you got guys not cutting or all cutting in the same direction at once. Those are things you got to learn. Like you got to learn how to cut effectively, right? Like these are things that are taught, and it's the boring things that you have to go at practice and training camp.
Like
right?
even when we were watching Miami Heat the other night, it was like you're watching the way that Gabe Vincent and PJ Tucker on the second line of defense, as Bam is, because he's so incredible and can guard along the perimeter. They're down in the second line of defense. Their guys kind of cut over each other. They don't even have to say switch. They're not even confused for a second. They just understand defense to such a high level of already being in help and then continuing forward with the guys that are continuing on to their side. Like it's just the knowledge of the game in that standard that is set in Miami. I'm not acting like the Kings are going to get it just as soon as they get a new head coach that might understand basketball. It has to be taught. And I feel like out of all the years, this is a great team for the Kings to have that buy-in. I feel like there's a lot of good guys on the squad that can understand basketball at a high level. It just has to be taught and managed the right way.
Well, I also think that this coaching search has been a nice distraction from the fact that the second Monty hires his coach, he's got to start figuring out this roster.
Yeah.
Again, talking about Mark Jackson, Mike Brown, Steve Clifford, or whether it was Darvin Ham or Will Hardy, whoever. It's cute. It's a fun little way to veer away from the fact, like, yo, what are we going to do with the 4 or the 3? Or how are we going to build some depth here? How are we going to continue to build around De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis? Like, what's next? Because you made the mistake of just kind of running it back last year, thinking, oh, we made enough moves at the trade deadline. Obviously, this move with Domantas Sabonis is significantly larger than acquiring, with all due respect, Terrence Davis and Mo Harkless. But at the same time, we've got work to do. And by we, I mean Monty McNair and Monty McNair only. Like, you've got work to do to improve this roster.
Yeah, and it's not like you have all this cap space to go drop a big contract offer at, like some people talking about Zach LaVine. I'm like, well, one, why is Zach LaVine coming to Sacramento? That's not happening. It's not. He signed an offer sheet with you a few years back. That was a different time. He knew Chicago was probably going to match it anyway. So you got to be creative. One, you better hope you get lucky in the draft. That would be cool, right? Get a deep, maybe you move up top 4, or if you're stuck at 7 or 8, like draft the right guy. But like, what other moves are you going to make? I mean, it's just tough. Like Rashawn's deal, like, I know I've heard James Ham say that's super movable. There's teams around the league that would trade for it. I'm not so sure. And I think part of it is that makes it complicated is there is a trade kicker in there, 15%. I think that either the team has to pay or his next team has to pay. That changes things, right? Like, yeah. And he's been injured a lot. I like Rashawn Holmes, but there's definitely, I don't think it's as easy as, you can easily just get it done. So they're going to have to be, I don't know. It's like him. Is HB get moved? And I like HB, but you're kind of limited on what moves you can really make to improve this team. So part of it is, can the coach get the most out of Fox, Sabonis? Does Davion take another step? I don't know. It's got to be tough.
It got to be a whole new structure, a whole new standard, a whole new culture. I know that's asking a lot, and it's like that's hard to build in 1 year. But I feel like this is going to be a very receptive roster that the Kings have, where in years past, you wouldn't get that with Buddy Hield, right? Like you never know, but most likely you're not going to get that with Buddy Hield.
We refer to him as Schmuddy Field on this show.
Schmuddy Field. I like that. So Schmuddy Field, you're probably not going to get that. And that buy-in is going to come, especially when you have leaders in Sabonis and De'Aaron Fox that want this now more than ever.
Yeah, I agree. We talked about it a lot. We've gone back and forth. I want to know what you guys think is going to happen. I really don't. I mean, I think it'd be more exciting on a number of different levels for me to have Mark Jackson. But they won't.
You want some chaos? You want some chaos for next few months?
Chaos. And I said earlier this week, I said, I believe that Mark Jackson has the highest ceiling as a coach. I think he can get them to heights. Not he will get them. I think he can get them to heights higher than Clifford and Mike Brown. Just a gut feeling. No. Whose side is he on? Just a gut feeling. No analysis or like no sabermetrics or anything behind it. Just a gut feeling. I think it's going to be Mark Jackson. Who do you guys think?
I think it's going to be Mike Brown. I think it's going to be Mike Brown. I think either guy is going to win the press conference. Not that I don't know if that matters much. I think most Kings fans at this point are like, just Mike Brown, at least to some of the fans on social media and on Reddit. But I actually think if Mark Jackson got the job, I think he'd win some people over just by his press conference.
So anytime I hope something for the Kings, it never happens. So I know I hope it's going to be Mike Brown. So I think it's going to be Mark Jackson.
So it's obviously going to be Steve Clifford. Like, let's call it what it is. Like, it's
very obvious for us to win.
You guys, that's the other thing too, Kenny. I'm worried about that is like, what if Mike Brown is offered something that isn't good enough of what he actually wants to actually leave the Golden State Warriors? And now that he's had this great interview process as a finalist with the Sacramento Kings head coaching search, that I'm good. I can wait till a few more jobs open or even till next season. And because I'm happy and I like my life where it is. I don't want chaos.
I think the parameters for what Mike Brown would want here have already been established. I actually think the parameters for what both coaches, because there's not three of them. I think you have early discussions with agents like, hey, we're moving on into the second interview process. You know, what do you like? We want you to be a part of it. We want your client to be a part of it. Like, let's talk a little bit. Let's not nail down anything. Let's get a perimeter for what the most important things that candidate 1, candidate 2, or candidate 3 is looking for. I don't feel the way about Mark Jackson that a lot of other people do. I think Mike Brown is the right hire. Yeah. And
me too.
We don't have to spend a ton of time. How do you feel like the whole process gone, like eliminating all of the first time candidates and the younger candidates right out the gate? Like, did that bother you? Because for me, like it was Hardy, Ham, and then it was Mike Brown. So when you took the other two out, for me, it was easy. It was like, well, it's Mike Brown then. Like, that's the guy that I like in this. But how did you guys feel about those candidates being eliminated early?
I mean, I guess I was surprised, especially someone like Darvin Ham, because he's got a reputation around the league as someone who's ready for the job. And I think he probably gets a head coaching job this offseason. But, you know, we're not in the interview process. Like, Darvin Ham did interview for jobs last year. He didn't get them. I mean, so did Charles Lee, right? So I don't know. I mean, I was kind of on board with, hey, go Darvin Ham. Let's get a fresh face in here. Let's do it. Let's see what that's all about. I like him. I not only as a player, he had play with that edge. You hear the stuff from Milwaukee, his relationships with players, how guys on the Bucks, they love him, but they're also kind of scared of him. I'm like, okay, I dig what I'm hearing. So it did surprise me, but I'm cool with Mike Brown. I think he checks a lot of the boxes that we all talk about, right? Defense, some structure. And I think evolution is important too. This guy's been around great head coaches, dating back to Carlisle, to Popovich, to Kerr now. And he's talked about how he's kind of evolved and he's not as rigid as he used to be because he's been around Kerr and seeing the success that they've had with the Warriors and what has worked. You know, so many people want to hate on him. Oh man, but he had LeBron in his prime. Hey, those rosters weren't that great. LeBron's awesome, but those rosters weren't that great.
Yeah, Booby Gibson.
Yes, thank you, Booby Gibson. Right?
Be nice.
But like, and then they want to hit him with the Lakers and going back to the Cavs. guys can evolve. He's been in the game, right? Like he has evolved as a coach. I think
he was successful with the
defense.
Lakers, by the way. Like people think he failed with the Lakers. He was fired after 5 games, but the season before he was like 40 and 20 something in a 66 game season.
Also, let's not act as if the Lakers are some beacon for stability now. Like they're just as unstable as the Kings in some ways. The difference is they're able to land a LeBron every once in a while.
So when I heard that the fresh faces didn't make it to the next level or the next step in this interview process, I wasn't like other people where you saw the extremes, right? Where you saw people just so pissed off because they obviously have been doing so much work in researching these people for 2 whole weeks, you know, and so they knew so much about a lot of these fresh-faced coaches.
Shots fired.
Well, it is shots fired because people are so dramatic and so extreme at times that, like, I can understand being taken back, but like, people, let's get into that gray area. Were you in that interview process? Like, I know at the end of the day, seeing what the fresh faces are doing around the NBA, that's where I was taken back. I'm like, oh, I want that for the Kings. But hey, I'm not pissed off because I don't know what was happening in this interview process. I don't know exactly what direction the Kings want to go. As soon as the finalists were picked, I was like, okay, so they want to go with experience in that head coaching position, I guess, if you want to put it in that category. But yeah, I think people just need to be more open to everything and understand that it's not Vlade picking a head coach and that it's a new GM. It's Monty McNair too. And that's why over year after year after year, when people do go, the Kings are just going to get it wrong. The Kings are going to, they might get it wrong again, but guess what? There's different people in place to hopefully make it right.
Morgan versus the baby giraffe at WrestleMania.
Oh, did he say that?
Let's go.
I didn't even read his tweet.
I don't know. I just assumed Tim Maxwell would say something like that.
And I liked him.
Let's be honest. But a month ago, no one knew Will Hardy. Let's stop it. All right. Let's not act like you guys all knew who Will Hardy was. All right. You thought he was like Jeff and Matt's brother. Just half the praise.
Okay, wait a minute. First of all, I knew who Will Hardy was. Second, he's not Jeff and Matt's brother.
See, I'm cool with you knowing, but like, it's just like so many people. I can't believe that Will Hardy's not a finalist. You can't believe
you know what,
it.
The great part about this is the stuff everyone loves about Will Hardy and the stuff that everyone loves about Charles Lee and particularly Darvin Ham and Will Hardy.
Yeah,
Mike Brown has every single one of those. Every single one. With one very notable exception. He's got multiple 60-win seasons on his resume, a finals appearance, and I think in 8 years, 7 years, 8 years, one under 500 season.
And as we're making closing remarks,
not counting the 5-game season.
As we're making closing remarks here for our two sides, I'm always like, it cracks me up when people talk about like Mark Jackson. He's only got 3 years experience and he hasn't coached in 8 years. Mark Jackson has been somewhere in a cult on a mountain, and basketball is just
that was a terrible example because no one would be shocked if it was true.
And basketball is the Rubik's Cube of life, where I'm sorry, if you haven't coached in 8 years, there's no way that you can keep up with the way basketball is going. I can make the argument that Mark Jackson might have been at the forefront of the type of basketball you see today. He's the one that looked at what was going on and said, maybe we can start doing this a little bit more. Steve Kerr and some other people came and turned it on its head and did a little bit more. But Steve Kerr wasn't having 75 to 79 basketball games when he was coaching Golden State. They were letting that thing fly. Well, real quick, Deuce, we act like Mark Jackson had just found basketball when he started coaching the Warriors. This guy been in basketball his entire life. He's been around some of the greatest coaches to ever coach in this game. And while different philosophies and strategies and analytics have come into play, there's core fundamental things about basketball that he got a PhD in not only from other coaches, but him being one of the greatest point guards that ever played a game.
I'm with you on that. I would say it is fair to ask those questions about the layoff, right? It's fair to ask him the tough questions about the divisiveness that's been reported. And part of it too is, let's not get twisted, Joe Lacob likes to pop off a lot. And Joe Lacob, especially then, was a younger owner in the NBA, and he was letting it fly on Mark Jackson. And I mean, Mark Jackson got buried by him. He really did. And I think I'm not trying to act like Mark Jackson, doesn't deserve any blame for what went down there. But again, his 3 seasons there, he helped establish a culture. That's not just me saying that. That's not just Kenny saying that. Steve Kerr's talked about the defensive culture that he brought, the belief. That's Steph Curry talking about recently why he deserves another chance. Draymond Green, so those things can't be ignored. There shouldn't be absolutes when we're talking about this stuff. So if Mark ends up being the guy, it is the ultimate swing for the fences move, in my opinion. And I would be really interested to see how it works out. I wouldn't bet that it would, but I also would not be shocked if he found a way to get another chance. He's learned from that first experience. He knows he played 17 years in the NBA. It's not this guy played a high level in the NBA. He's a smart guy. He's been a vocal leader. He's gotten the most out of that Warriors team, got them going in the right direction. So we'll see if he gets the shot here or elsewhere. I'm eager to see how it plays out.
Set your alerts. Deuce and Mo, they're on high alert for the next couple of days. So there's a little bell on YouTube. Hit that so it alerts you every time they go live. Same thing on Twitch. Subscribe to the podcast wherever you get podcasts from. That's Deuce.